I used to think the worst sound in the world was a scream. Then the scream stopped, and I learned that silence was far more patient, far more honest. It waited. It counted you. We had been holed up in the service tunnels beneath the old freight depot for 19 days. 19 days of measured breathing, canned beans eaten cold, and the grind of distant machinery that nobody could explain. Mara kept the count on a folded utility map, ticking off each day with the stub of a pencil she guarded like scripture. She had been a paramedic before the collapse, and she still carried the habit of exactness, of treating every wound and every hour as though someone were watching. I think, in her head, someone was. Del worked in the corner by the lantern, tightening a frayed belt on a generator that had not turned over in 3 days. He was a short, square man, with hands that knew how to fix things, and a face that had not quite learned how to stop hoping. He hummed sometimes, old hymns without the words. 4 cans left, Mara said without looking up. 2 days if we ration, 1 if we don't. We don't, I said. She glanced at me the way she did when I was being honest against my own interest. We don't. Del didn't look over. You're both forgetting the filters. Another week, and we're breathing our own exhaust down here. We won't be here another week, I said. I had not told them yet where we would be going. The words were still forming in my mouth when we heard the scrape from the east tunnel. And every pretense of conversation collapsed around us like dust from the ceiling. You learn the difference eventually between the sound of a living person and the sound of something that is only wearing the shape of one. The living shuffle. They breathe through their nose. They hesitate at turns. What I heard that night did none of those things. It came in a steady drag, heel and toe, like someone had forgotten how walking used to feel and was doing their best to remember. Mara killed the lantern. Del went still as a held breath. I moved to the crack in the bulkhead where the grate had never quite closed. There were 3 of them. The first was a man in a reflective jacket, the kind the road crews had worn in the last summer before the collapse. His jaw hung open in a long, soft, lopsided way, and where his eyes should have caught the moonlight, there was only a dry, granular dark. The second wore what might have been a nurse's shirt once. The third was small. I made myself look at the third, only long enough to confirm what my body already knew. And then I looked away, and I did not look back. 3, I whispered. East Passage. They have not scented us. Yet, Mara said. Del whispered something I could not hear, but his lips moved in the shape of the hymn he had been humming. We did not move for 22 minutes. Mara counted them on her wrist. When the dragging faded back into the throat of the tunnel, she exhaled once, carefully, like she was releasing a patient from her hands. We cannot stay here, she said. No, I said. Where then? I should have told them in daylight. I should have told them when the lantern was warm and the beans were not yet gone. But the dark was what we had. And the dark is where truths are easiest to set down. There is a factory, I said. Sealed before the outbreak, before any of this. I know where. I know why. Del's humming stopped. Why would it be sealed? Mara asked. Before. I did not answer her immediately. Some questions deserve the courtesy of a pause. The tunnels led us out into a drainage field 3 miles east of the depot. Dawn was a gray promise on the horizon, and the sky held that washed, indifferent light that comes when the weather has given up caring what happens beneath it. We moved in the loose, staggered line Mara had taught us, each person 8 paces from the next, each carrying their own silence. Del walked third. I had expected questions. He gave me none. When we stopped at the culvert to check our water, he finally spoke, and his voice had a flatness I had never heard from him. You know I worked there. I know. For 11 years. I know. He looked at me, and for a moment the hope that usually lived in his face was not quite in its usual place. Then you know why it was sealed. I did not answer. I had wanted him to say it, and I think he understood that because his mouth tightened. And he did not give me the gift. Mara watched the exchange the way she had watched her patients, weighing without judgment, filing without speaking. When Dell moved off to check the culvert's downstream end, she came to my shoulder. "Whatever it is," she said, "I need to know before we get there. Not when we arrive, not when we are tired and leveraged. Now." "Fair," I said. "So?" I watched Dell's back. He was pretending to inspect the stream. He was listening. "The factory made weapons," I said. "Small arms mostly. Official contract work. That was the daylight side. Underneath, in the deeper levels, they ran a program the contract did not name. Something chemical. Something the government wanted plausible deniability about. The program was shut down 18 months before the outbreak. The factory was sealed 6 weeks before. Sealed by who? The people who ran the program. Why? That is what I do not know. Mara was quiet. Then, because she was Mara, she asked the question I had been dreading. "And what do you think is in there that was worth sealing before any of this happened?" "I think," I said, "that whatever they were afraid of, they were afraid of it before the world gave them permission to be afraid of anything." She did not answer that. She did not have to. We walked for 6 more hours. The fields gave way to a service road pocked with the ghosts of tire marks. A burned-out hatchback sat by the shoulder, its doors open, its upholstery gone to the weather, and to whatever small animal still thought the world was worth chewing. Mara paused at the hatchback and looked inside with the clinical patience she brought to every abandoned thing. She did not tell us what she saw. We did not ask. By the time the sun had climbed to its indifferent noon, we had crossed 2 more fields and entered the thin fringe of pine that edged the old county line. The pines had grown wild in the absence of maintenance. Their needles muted our steps. It was in that muting that I first heard the other footfalls, softer than ours, matched to ours, trailing us at a distance of perhaps 40 yards. I signaled. Mara saw it. Dell caught her signal a beat later, and the 3 of us stopped without appearing to stop, the way you stop when you do not want something to know you have noticed it. The footfalls stopped with us. Not infected. Infected did not stop. "Living," Mara breathed. "Or waiting to decide," Dell said. I set my pack down with careful casualness, and I let my hand rest near the handle of the long knife I had carried since the 2nd week of the collapse. I had used it twice. I did not want to use it a 3rd time. I was not sure I had a choice. "Come out," I called into the pines. Slowly, hands first. For a long moment, nothing. Then a voice, young, female, unsteady with the particular exhaustion of people who have been alone too long. "If I come out," the voice said, "do you promise not to be like the last ones?" "I promise nothing," I said. "But I have no interest in being the last ones." She came out slowly. She was smaller than her voice had suggested, wrapped in a canvas coat 2 sizes too large, her hair cut close to her skull with what looked like a knife that had not been patient. Her hands were empty. Her eyes were not. She gave her name as Sana. She did not give a surname, and neither Mara nor I asked. Dell watched her from a cautious middle distance, the way he watched machines he did not yet trust. She had been traveling alone for 11 days. She had been with 3 others before that. She did not explain what had happened to the 3 others, and her silence on the matter was its own long sentence. Mara, assessed her the way she assessed everything, starting at the hands and ending at the eyes. And when she was done, she nodded once, which in Mara's vocabulary was a verdict. "We are going somewhere," Mara said. "You can walk with us. You do not have to stay with us when we arrive." "Where are you going?" "A factory," I said. Sana's face did a small thing then, a shift at the edge of her mouth that I did not have time to read. She turned and looked back the way we had come, as though the question had opened a door behind her. "The one north of Ellery?" she asked. I let the pause carry itself. Dell's breathing changed. Mara, to her credit, did not look at me. "Yes," I said. "Then I am not walking with you," Sana said. "I am walking away from you." She said it without heat. It was the flat, factual delivery of someone who had decided, a long time ago, that her life was not a negotiation. "Why?" Mara asked. Sana's hands moved at her sides, not toward a weapon, but toward the empty place where a weapon might have been. "Because my brother worked security there. And the last thing he said to me 3 days before the sealing was that if I ever heard that someone had opened it, I was to run in the opposite direction for as long as my legs would carry me." Dell did not speak. He had gone very still in the way he had gone still in the tunnel. And I understood then that he had known about her brother, or at least about men like him, and that the still place in him was a place where a great deal of unspoken weight was being stored. "Your brother," Mara said carefully. "Where is he now?" "I do not know," Sana said. "I have not known for 11 days. The pines held the silence for us. "Walk with us," I said. "As far as the eastern ridge. You do not have to go further. From the ridge, you can see the factory. You can see what we are walking toward. And then you can decide whether to run." She studied me. Whatever she saw, she did not share. After a long moment, she nodded, and she fell in behind Mara without speaking. We walked another 3 hours before the light began to fail. Mara found us a shallow rise screened by boulders, and we made a cold camp, and we did not light a fire. Dell ate almost nothing. Sana ate everything she was given, and then sat apart, her back to a stone, her eyes open. I took first watch. The dark, when it came without wind. I could hear my own heart in it. Near midnight, I heard Dell moving. He came and sat beside me without asking. For a long while, we said nothing. Then he spoke, very quietly, in a voice that did not ask to be answered. "There is a room on the 4th sublevel," he said, "behind 2 doors. If we get that far, and you see me walking toward that room, I want you to stop me." "How do I stop you?" "However you need to," he said. And then he went back to his blanket, and he did not speak again until morning. Morning came with a thin rain that did not commit to falling. Sana was up before any of us, crouched at the edge of the boulders with a strip of jerky between her teeth, watching the horizon with the attention of someone who had learned, at cost, that horizons were where trouble was born. Dell was subdued. He packed with slow, precise movements, each strap pulled to its exact tension, each buckle seated with a care that in any other man I would have called ritual. In him, that morning, it looked like bargaining. Mara came to my elbow as I shouldered my pack. "What did he say to you last night?" I considered lying. Mara was not a person you lied to. "He said that if we make it to the 4th sublevel, and he walks toward a specific room, I should stop him." "Stop him? How?" "However I need to." Her jaw did the small thing it did when she was placing information into the mental drawer where she kept things that might, eventually, require action. She nodded once, and she moved on without comment. And I understood that she had filed the thing not against Dell, but alongside him, the way she filed a patient's allergy alongside their name. We walked east. The rain committed finally, and then uncommitted, and the pines gave way to a stretch of brown pasture bordered by the ruins of a split-rail fence. The fence had fallen in long, tired sections. The pasture was full of black birds that rose, as we approached, in a single coordinated rearrangement of the sky, and settled again behind us without any apparent investment in our passage. It was in the pasture that I first began to feel the wrongness. It is hard to describe. In the months since the collapse, the world had developed a consistent texture of ruin. Broken things stayed broken. Empty places stayed empty. The landscape had a grammar, and you learned to read it. And when something was strange, you knew it at the level of the skin before you knew it at the level of the mind. The pasture was too empty. Even the black birds felt like a gesture at life rather than a fact of it. "Do you see the tree line?" Sana said low. I saw it. A quarter-mile ahead, where the pasture ended and a thicket of young birch began. The grass had been pressed down in a wide, curved arc. Something had moved through recently, something large or something numerous. And it had moved with a kind of directional intent that did not belong to weather. "How old?" Mara asked. "Hours," I said. "Which direction?" "North, same as us." Del stopped walking. It took us a beat to notice, and when we turned, his face had gone the color of old paper. "There is a convoy route," he said, "that runs parallel to our road. If someone is moving north in numbers, they are using it. And the only reason anyone would be moving toward the factory is because someone else is moving toward it first." "Other survivors?" Sana asked. "Or not survivors," Del said. We did not quite understand what he meant. He did not offer a clarification. He only began to walk again, faster now. And we followed him because we had already, at some point, we had not quite noticed, begun to follow him. By mid-afternoon, we crossed the arc of pressed grass and entered the birches. The ground beneath the young trees was a pale carpet of wet leaves, and the leaves held, in scattered places, the impressions of boots. I counted 9 distinct treads. Mara counted 11. Sana, quieter than either of us, said she thought there had been more, and that some had been dragging things. "Dragging what?" Mara asked. Sana did not answer. She crouched and touched a streak of darker wet in the leaves, and she looked up at us, and she did not need to say what she had confirmed. "How far ahead?" I asked. "An hour," she said. "Maybe less." Del was already walking. We caught the edge of them at dusk. Del had led us off the convoy route and onto a deer trail that paralleled it from a higher ridge. The ridge gave us a vantage, and the vantage gave us a problem. Below us, in the long, shallow bowl of what had once been a reservoir, perhaps 24 figures were moving in a loose formation around a cluster of vehicles. The vehicles were not military. They were not quite civilian. They were the sort of patched, plated, welded trucks that the collapse had bred in its early months, when the living had still believed that metal could solve what the world had become. "Count me," Mara breathed. 23, I said. "Plus 3 at the tail I cannot quite see." "Armed?" "All of them." She exhaled. "Who was in front?" I found him with the binoculars. A tall, heavy-shouldered man in a long gray coat, bareheaded in the cold, his hair the color of wet iron. He was gesturing at a map spread on the hood of the lead truck, and around him the others had arranged themselves in the quiet, deferential geometry that forms around men who do not need to raise their voices. "A leader," I said. "Older, gray coat. I do not know him." Del took the binoculars from me. He looked for a long moment. When he handed them back, his hand was not steady. "I know him," he said. "His name is Rook. He was the site manager at the factory for the last 4 years before the sealing. Before, Mara repeated. Before. Sana had gone very still at my other shoulder. Is he a good man? Del considered the question. He considered it longer than a good man's friend would have needed to. He is, he said finally. A man who has never done a thing he could not justify. That is not an answer, Sana said. It is the only honest one I have. We watched them for another hour. The convoy did not move. They were making camp, it seemed, in the bowl of the reservoir. And they had the settled efficiency of men who intended to be there through the night. A fire rose. Voices carried up to us in loose fragments, too far to resolve into words but close enough to establish mood. They are not hunting, Mara said. They are waiting. For what? Sana asked. I did not answer her because I had just understood the answer. For someone to open the factory from the inside, I said. Del's head came around. I watched my own hypothesis land in him. I watched him reject it briefly and then accept it, and then accept the next implication after that, which was the worst one. They do not have the codes, he said. They do not have the codes. And they know that someone else might. Someone else who used to work there, I said. Someone else who kept their credentials because they could not bear to throw them away. Del looked at his hands. They were the hands of a man who had built things, and who had not, in his own accounting, ever built anything that should have been sealed. So we have two problems, Mara said. The sealing and the watchers. 3, Sana said. We turned to her. Whatever they are waiting to come out, she said, is the third. We withdrew from the ridge before the moon rose. Del led us west along the deer trail for half a mile, and then north along a spine of bare rock that he said, without explaining how he knew, would not hold a footprint. He was quieter than he had been in the morning. He was quieter than he had been in the tunnel. He walked the way a man walks when he has begun, against his will, to calculate. We made camp in a hollow beneath a dead oak. No fire, no lantern. Mara took first watch. Del did not sleep. Sana slept the way the young sleep when they have nothing left to protect. I lay awake and counted, in my head, the doors between us and the room Del had asked me to keep him from. We reached the factory perimeter at the edge of the third day. It did not announce itself. The convoy route had ended an hour behind us, and the deer trail had run out at the base of a long, slow hill. At the top of the hill, the trees thinned, and we came up into a clearing that was not natural. And the clearing held the factory the way a held breath holds a word. It was larger than I had expected. It was also smaller, in a way I could not at first explain. And then I understood. Most of it was underground. What we could see from the clearing was a single long, low building of poured concrete, roofed in corrugated steel, windowless on the north face, with a single pair of blast doors set into the east wall and a thin antenna tower rising above the roofline at a slight, ugly lean. The building sat inside a double fence. The outer fence had been breached in 2 places. The inner fence had not. The inner fence still hummed, faintly, in a register I could feel in my teeth. Power, Mara said. Geothermal, Del said. The whole facility was built over a deep loop system. It has not needed the grid in 30 years. It will not need the grid in 30 more. Sana looked at him. You are saying it has been running this whole time. I am saying the lights are still on inside. The blast doors were closed. They had been closed when I had last seen them, in a briefing I was not supposed to have attended 17 months ago. They had a seam of rust at the hinges now, and the concrete around them had begun the slow work of weathering. But the seal was still intact. I could see the bead of the welding that had been added after the last legitimate closure. Someone welded them shut, Sana said. Someone welded them shut from the outside, Dell said. Which means whoever did it did not intend to come back in. And whoever did it, Mara said, knew what was in there well enough to believe that the welding would help. We did not enter that day. We did not even approach the inner fence. Dell led us to a granite outcrop on the west rim of the clearing where a shallow overhang made a natural blind. And we set our packs down, and we watched. For 6 hours, nothing. The blast doors did not open. The antenna did not turn. The hum of the inner fence did not change. The only motion in the clearing was the drift of the long grass, and once, a pair of crows that landed briefly on the roof and left again in the unhurried way of birds who had found nothing of interest. And then, near dusk, we saw the first thing that made me understand why Sana's brother had told her to run. In the long grass, at the base of the inner fence, something moved. It was not a crow. It was not a rat. It moved with a low, patient, sliding motion, close to the ground, unhurried and unshapely. It moved from the south corner of the fence toward the east blast doors. And when it reached the doors, it stopped. And for a long moment, it did nothing. And then it pressed itself against the seam of the welding. And it stayed there. We could not see what it was. The grass was too long, and the light was too gone. "Is that?" Sana whispered. "Inside or outside?" "Outside," Dell said too quickly. "How do you know?" He did not answer. Mara lowered her binoculars. Her face, in the last blue light, had the stillness she wore when she was deciding whether to tell a family something they were not ready to hear. "We cannot open those doors," she said. "No," Dell agreed, "we cannot." "So we find another way in." Dell nodded. He did not look at me. He did not need to. "There is one," he said. "There is always one. It is the one they did not seal because they did not know it existed." Dell's unsealed way in was a concrete access shaft set into the side of a dry creek bed, half a mile west of the main facility. It had been capped, originally, with a pressure hatch and a coated panel. The hatch had rusted. The panel was dead. The coating mechanism, Dell explained, had been built to resist entry from above, not exit from below, which meant that a patient man with the right pry bar and 20 minutes of silence could coax the hatch open without triggering anything the facility would notice. We did not have 20 minutes of silence. We had the convoy, an hour's walk to the east, waiting for someone to do precisely this. "They do not know about this shaft," Dell said. "Rook did not have clearance for the subsurface grid. He would not know it is here." "And if he does?" Mara asked. "Then we will have been unlucky." We approached the creek bed at moonrise. Sana went first, low and quick, and Dell followed. And Mara and I came last with the packs. The hatch was under a skein of dead bramble that had grown over the original camouflage mesh. Dell cleared the bramble with a care that suggested he had, at some point in his life, cleared it before. The pry bar was Mara's. She had carried it since the 2nd month, wrapped in a strip of oilcloth inside her pack. She handed it to Dell without comment. He worked the hatch in slow, deliberate increments, pausing between each pull to listen. And in the long gaps between his work, I could hear the night as a single, held instrument. The faint hiss of the fence 300 yards east. The occasional rasp of a crow resettling on the roof. The smaller sound of our own breath, which we had not entirely mastered. On the 23rd pull, the hatch broke its seal. The sound it made was not loud, but it was the unmistakable sound of an interior pressure evening itself with the outside air. And all 4 of us froze at the small gasp of it. The air that came up from the shaft was cold. It was dry, and it carried an odor that I had not anticipated and did not know how to place. It was not rot. It was not the sour, sweet, infected smell we had all learned to flinch from. It was chemical, faintly sweet, with a metallic undertone that I felt against the back of my teeth. Preservative, Mara said after a long moment, or something like it. The deep levels were climate-controlled, Dell said. The seals on those sections would have held. Held what in? Sana asked. Or held what out? Dell did not answer. We descended in the order we had chosen without discussing. Dell first, because he knew the shaft. Me second, because I could catch him if he fell. Mara third, because she could anchor Sana. Sana last, because she was the lightest and the quickest. And because she could still pull the hatch down behind her without needing leverage from below. The shaft ran 30 feet straight down and then angled sharply east. A ladder of iron rungs had been set into the concrete, and the rungs were cold, and they rang very faintly under our weight. At the bottom, the shaft opened into a narrow horizontal conduit, lit at intervals by small recessed service lamps that had impossibly not gone out in the years since the facility had been sealed. The light was yellow. It was the yellow of places that had been maintained by systems rather than by people. It was the yellow of a vigil no one was keeping. How is the power? Sana whispered. Still on. Because it never needed us, Dell said. We moved east along the conduit for what I estimated to be 100 yards. The air grew colder. The chemical smell grew stronger. At the end of the conduit, we reached a small, featureless door with a handle that had been painted white and had not been touched by any hand since the painting had dried. Dell put his palm against it. This, he said, is the first door. He did not open it immediately. He stood there with his palm on the door, and he breathed in a slow, measured way, and I realized he was giving himself permission. The realization was not pleasant. I had not, until that moment, understood how much of his composure had been borrowed from the version of himself who had never intended to come back here, and how quickly that loan was being called in. Before we go through, he said, I need to say a thing. Say it, Mara said. What is on the other side of this door is the maintenance ring of the first sublevel. There are offices. There is a break room. There is a locker area. There will be bodies. I do not know how many. I know there were still people in the building the week of the sealing. I do not know how many of them got out. Dell, Mara said gently. I know some of them did not get out, he said, because I was the one who reported the head count. None of us answered him. There are moments in which the correct response is not to forgive a thing, but to absorb it, and let the person who has spoken understand that they have been heard. Mara was better at this than I was. Sana, to my surprise, was as good as Mara. Dell opened the door. The maintenance ring was exactly as he had described, and it was worse. The break room was preserved in the way that only climate-controlled spaces are preserved. A coffee cup still on the table, a newspaper folded beside it, a cardigan draped on the back of a chair, as though its owner had only stepped out for a moment. The chemical smell was thicker here. A low, clean veil laid over what should have been a much worse smell. And I understood, abruptly, why the air tasted the way it did. The facility's climate system had been scrubbing this level for 17 months. Whatever had happened here had been happening in a room that would not let it decay. The bodies were in the locker area. I did not count them. Mara counted them. She did it the way she had done everything in her paramedic life, with a stillness that refused to let horror become drama. 11, she said quietly. And she did not say more, and I did not ask. They were not infected. That was the first thing I understood, and it was the thing that disarranged me. Their wounds were not bites. Their wounds were small, precise, and grouped. Someone with training had made them, and someone with training had then arranged the bodies along the benches in the long straight rows of the orderly dead. This was not the outbreak, Sana whispered. No, Del said. This was the ceiling. Who did it? Del did not answer. He walked along the row of benches without touching anything, and he stopped at the fourth body, and he stood there for a long time. His name was Marcus, he said finally. He ran the line I worked on. He had 3 daughters. Del, Mara said. I am telling you so that I can keep walking. She nodded. She did not push him further. We left the locker area through a door at its far end, which Del unlocked with a key he produced from an inner pocket of his coat. I had not known he had the key. I suspected none of us had known. Mara did not ask where it had come from, and I understood that this was a kindness that she was extending to him on credit, against a later conversation neither of them yet wanted to have. The corridor beyond the locker area ran toward the central stairwell. The stairwell, Del said, went down. It went down 4 levels. At the 4th level was the room he had asked me to keep him from. We were not going to the 4th level yet. We were going to the 2nd. On the 2nd, he said, were the logs. If we were going to understand what we were inside of, we were going to understand it from the logs first. We walked toward the stairwell in the careful silence of people who were no longer certain who, among them, could still be trusted. The logs were kept in a records room at the north end of the 2nd sublevel, behind a door that still bore the stenciled warning of a regulatory authority that had, by that point in the world, ceased to exist. Del had a 2nd key for that door as well. Mara watched him use it. She did not speak. Sana watched her watching him. Inside, the records room was smaller than I had expected. It was a long, narrow vault of metal shelving and filing cabinets, lit by the same yellow vigil light as the conduit. The air here was drier. The chemical smell had thinned. What remained was the smell of old paper and older ink. The smell that rooms acquire when they have been dedicated to the keeping of things that were supposed to outlast their keepers. Del went to the 3rd cabinet from the back. He did not hesitate. He opened the top drawer, and he pulled out a thick green binder, and he set it on the small metal desk that had been placed precisely beneath the single overhead bulb. Read this, he said. Not all of it. The last 2 sections. That will be enough. Mara opened the binder. I stood at her shoulder. Sana stood at Mara's other shoulder. Del stood at the door, watching the corridor, because he had either already read it, or he did not need to read it to know. The first pages were technical. Specifications, schematics, maintenance schedules. Mara turned through them with the patience of a woman who had learned to read through technical language for the clinical truth buried beneath it. The second to last section was a sequence of internal communications dated across a 4-month window ending 6 weeks before the sealing. The communications were between a director, Holland, and a research lead named Abrams. They concerned a project that was referred to only by a code, 2 letters, and a numeral, that Mara did not explain and did not need to. Director Holland was unhappy with the project's containment protocols. Research lead Abrams was unhappy with Director Holland's understanding of the project's containment protocols. The tone of the communications escalated. Over the 4 months, it moved from professional disagreement to professional alarm, to a terseness that, in the language of people who are paid to avoid panic, is panic itself. The final communication in the section was a single line. It was from Holland. It was dated 6 weeks before the sealing. It read, "We cannot contain it. We can only refuse to let it out." Mara did not speak. Neither did I. The last section of the binder was the sealing order itself. It was handwritten. It was signed by 9 people. 5 of the signatures were names I did not know. 3 were names Del whispered aloud, very softly, in the way one whispers a debt. The ninth signature at the bottom, in the looping, careful hand of a man who had not wanted to be the last one to sign, was Rook's. Rook was inside, Sana said. Rook was inside, Dell confirmed. And he got out. He got out because he signed the order, and because he held the line while the welders came, and because the welders were his men. And when the welding was done, he walked away. And now he is back, Mara said. Outside, waiting. Now he is back, outside, waiting. I understood then why Rook was waiting. He was not waiting for the factory to open. He was waiting to hear it try. He was waiting to learn, finally, whether the thing he had sealed had died without him, or whether it had waited for him as patiently as he had waited for it. What is it? Sana asked. That he sealed? Dell closed the binder. He set his hand on its green cover. Come to the third level, he said. I cannot tell you. I can only show you. We followed him out of the records room. We should have burned the binder. We did not. There are many things we should have done that night, and we did only some of them. And the order in which we did them has, in my memory, become the order of everything that came after. The third sub-level had not been designed for human comfort. It had been designed for observation. The central corridor ran 100 feet in a long, gentle curve, and along the curve, at intervals, were windows. The windows were thick. Behind each window was a small, sealed room, and each room had been furnished with a cot, a table, a lamp, and a chair, in the clean, impersonal way of a place that had been asked to look like a place. The rooms were not empty. I will not describe what was in them. I said, at the outset of this telling, that violence in it would be implied and not indulged, and I meant it, and I will keep it. What I will say is this. Whatever the project had been, it had not ended when the sealing began. The climate systems had continued, the lights had continued, and the things in the rooms had continued, in the slow, suspended way of things that had been caught between one state and another and had not been permitted by their circumstances to complete the crossing. Mara stopped at the third window. She stood there for a long time. When she finally turned away, her face had the particular composure she wore after she had lost a patient. It was not grief. It was the shape grief took in a woman who had long ago decided that grief was a private currency and would not be spent in front of other people. How many? She asked. 12 rooms, Dell said. 12 subjects. Subjects. That is the word they used. Were they people first? Dell did not answer. He did not have to. Sanana had not stopped at any of the windows. She had walked instead to the far end of the corridor, to a door that was larger than the others and that had a heavier mechanism. And she stood there with her hand near the handle but not on it, and she waited for us. This is the access to the fourth level, Dell said when we joined her. The room you asked me to keep you from, I said. Yes. Why? He looked at me. For the first time since the tunnel, he looked tired in the specific way I'd been waiting for him to look tired, which was the way of a man who had carried a thing for a very long time and was, without celebration, about to set it down. Because on the fourth level, he said, is the only copy of the procedure for undoing this. Undoing, Mara said. The project produced 2 outputs. The first was what you have just seen. The second was the procedure for reversing it. Holland developed the second to justify the first. She did not believe, at the end, that she would be permitted to use the second. She hid it on the fourth level. She told me where she hid it. 3 days before the sealing, because she did not trust herself to live long enough to tell anyone else. And you never came back for it, Sana said. I never came back for it, Dell said, because I was afraid of what I would do with it. "What would you do with it?" I asked. He was quiet for a long time. "I would use it," he said, "on my wife." None of us spoke. "She was in the pilot group," he said. "She was subject too. Her room is the one I did not let Mara look into." I understood then what he had been asking me to stop him from. He had not been asking me to stop him from retrieving the procedure. He had been asking me to stop him from using it. Mara broke the silence first. "Del," she said, and her voice was the voice she had used at bedsides. When she had understood that the next words she said would carry a family through the rest of a life. "Del, listen to me. I am listening. If you use the procedure on her, you do not know what she becomes. I know what she is now. You know what she was when they put her in there. You do not know what the procedure will return. The project produced one output we have seen. There is no reason to believe the second output undoes the first, rather than producing a third we have not yet imagined." "I have thought about that," Del said. "For how long?" 17 months. "And?" "I have decided that the not knowing is not enough." Sana had been watching the exchange with the attention of a person who had lost her own people and who understood, in a way neither Mara nor I could fully share, the weight that Del was carrying. She stepped between us, not to separate, but to be counted. "If you do this," she said, "I am not stopping you." "Sana," Mara said, "I am not, and I am not helping either. I am telling you what I will do, so that you can make your choice without pretending you do not know what the rest of us will do in response to it." Mara looked at me. The question in her look was clear. I did not, then, know my answer. I have had 17 months to know it. And I still am not sure that what I chose was the right thing to have chosen. Only that it was the thing I chose, and that I have not, since, been able to unchoose it. "Del," I said, "you asked me to stop you." "I did." "You asked me in the dark, on a ridge, before you had seen her again. Are you still asking?" He did not answer for a long time. "I am asking," he said finally, "for you to stop me if I am wrong." "That is not the same question." "No," he said. "It is not. We did not go through the door that night. We camped in the records room because it was the warmest place on the second sub-level, and because Mara said that none of us should be asked to sleep on the third level with the windows. We set a watch rotation. Del took the first. He sat at the small metal desk with the green binder in front of him, unopened. And he did not read it. And he did not close his eyes. I slept an hour. Mara woke me from my watch. When I sat down at the desk, Del was still there. He had not moved. "Go to sleep, Del. I am not tired. Go to sleep, Del, or I will ask Mara to make you." He looked at me with something that was almost a smile. It was the first almost smile I had seen on him in 4 days. It did not last. "Do you have a wife?" he asked. I did. "Tell me about her." I did not want to. I had not talked about her, not to Mara, not to anyone, in the 11 months since I had last heard her voice on a radio that had then gone quiet. But it was the middle of the night, and Del was asking, "And there are debts you pay by speaking." I told him about her. I told him how she laughed, which was the detail I had been most afraid of losing. I told him the things she always said when she was angry with me, which was not a cruelty, but a small habit of grammar I had come to love. I told him how she had died, which she had, and which I had not, until that night, said aloud to another human being. Del listened. When I was finished, he put his hand over mine on the desk, briefly, and he did not say anything. And then he went and lay down, and he slept. We went to the 4th level at dawn. We did not go as we had planned. We went because at some point in the last hours of the night, the antenna on the roof began to turn. Mara heard it first. She was on watch. She came into the records room at a pace that was not quite a run, because running inside a building like that was a thing none of us could bring ourselves to do. And she knelt by each of us, and she woke us in the specific order of usefulness. Sana first, me second, Del third. "The antenna is turning," she said. "It was not turning yesterday," Sana said. "It is turning now." Del was on his feet before the sentence was finished. His face had the pale, concentrated look of a man whose worst prediction had just been confirmed. "Rook," he said. "Rook has a directional. He has been trying to ping the facility from outside. The internal systems are responding to him. They are responding because we opened a door." "Can he get in?" Mara asked. "Not through the blast doors, not through the shaft, without knowing it is there. But he can see that the facility is awake, and he will move on the blast doors now, because he will assume someone on the inside is trying to open them. And he will not want them to open without him on the other side." "How long do we have?" I asked. "An hour, perhaps 2. There was no further discussion. We gathered our packs. We went to the central stairwell. We descended to the 4th level in the order we had established. And this time, Del moved without pause, without ceremony, without the small ritual tensions he had carried at every previous door, because he had finally run out of time to feel them. The 4th level was not laid out like the 3rd. There was no long, curving corridor. There was instead a single short hall that ended in a pair of doors. The first door was labeled storage. The second door was not labeled at all. Del went to the second door. He produced a 3rd key. Mara watched him produce it. She did not comment. Inside the unmarked door was a small, clean office. A desk. A terminal. Dark. A filing cabinet. And, on the wall behind the desk, a narrow framed photograph of a woman with short brown hair and a laugh caught mid-motion. Her eyes closed, her face turned toward the camera in the unguarded way of a person who had loved whoever was holding it. Del did not look at the photograph. He went to the filing cabinet. He opened the second drawer. He pulled out a slim manila folder. He opened the folder on the desk, and he read the first page, and his shoulders set in the particular way shoulders set when a person has confirmed a thing they had, until that moment, still permitted themselves to doubt. "It is here," he said. "Take it," Mara said. He closed the folder. "Del," Mara said. "Mara," Del said, "I want to go to her room." "Del." "I'm going." He walked past us, out of the office, and he turned left in the short hall, and he walked to the door at the end that I had not noticed on the way in. It was not labeled. It did not need to be. I looked at Mara. Mara looked at me. Sana looked at neither of us, because Sana had already made her choice on the 3rd level and was not going to remake it now. I followed Del. I did not catch him before the door. I did not stop him before he opened it. I stood in the hall, and I watched him cross the threshold, and I watched him stop. I watched him look at whatever was in the room for a long time, and then I watched him turn around, without having stepped further in, and walk back out, and close the door behind him, and set the folder very carefully on the floor at his feet. "I was wrong," he said. "We did not have time for what happened next. I want to say that we gave Del the moment he needed. I want to say that we stood in the hallway, in the yellow vigil light, and we let him have the grief he had been carrying for 17 months. But the antenna was turning on the roof, and Rook was moving on the blast doors, and time in that facility had stopped belonging to us the instant Mara had heard the first hum of the rotor. "Del," Mara said gently, "we have to go." "I know." Bring the folder. I know. He did not bring the folder. He stepped over it, and he walked past us toward the stairwell. And at the door of the stairwell, he paused. And he turned and he looked at me in a way I have since understood to have been an apology. "There is something I did not tell you," he said. "Del, the codes to the blast doors, I have them." Sana, who had been 3 paces behind him, stopped moving. "Del," Mara said. "I have the codes because I signed the sealing order," he said. "My name is not on it because I asked Holland to keep it off. I did not want my wife to know, if she ever read it, that I had been one of the 9. But I was one of the 9, and I have the codes." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, though I already knew. "Because if I do not come out of this building with you, you are going to need to open the blast doors to get out. The shaft we came in through does not have power-assisted egress. If we have to leave fast, we cannot climb. You will need the main doors, and the main doors will open to Rook." "Del," Mara said. "The codes are in the folder," Del said. "The one I set down. You will not need me to use them. You will only need to get to it if something happens to me." "Nothing is happening to you," Mara said. "Mara," Del said. And his voice was the voice of a man who loved her. Because at some point in the last 4 days, he had begun to, in the particular way survivors love each other. "Mara, you are the best person I've walked beside since the collapse. I'm not telling you this so that you can save me. I'm telling you this so that you can get the others out." We did not have time to argue. We did not have the argument. We went up the stairwell at the speed of people who had finally understood the shape of what they were doing. And Del went with us, because he had not yet decided not to. We were on the 2nd level when the blast doors began to sound. You could feel it before you heard it. The whole facility gave a small, low shudder, the way a building gives when a train passes underground. Then the sound came, a rhythmic, heavy knock, and then a grinding. And I understood that Rook had brought a cutting torch, or a breaching charge, or both, and that he was not going to wait for the codes. "He is cutting the weld," Del said. "How long?" Sana asked. 20 minutes, maybe 30. "Can we get to the shaft first?" "Yes," Del said. "All of us." He said it like a promise. I did not quite believe him, and I'm not sure he did either. But he said it, and we ran. At the door to the maintenance ring, we stopped. The door was open. It had been closed when we had come through it the night before. Del had closed it behind us. I remembered him closing it. It was open now, and in the yellow vigil light, in the locker area beyond it, the 11 orderly dead were not where we had left them. I will not describe what we saw in the locker area. I said at the outset that I would not indulge violence, and I will honor that now, where it matters most. What I will say is that the chemical smell, which had been a thin, clean veil over the facility for 17 months, had thinned. The climate system, which had held the first sub-level in its strange suspended grace, had responded to our entry by shifting some internal balance I did not and do not understand. And the 11, who had been beyond the reach of ordinary decay, had not, it turned out, been beyond the reach of whatever had been sealed with them. They were not infected exactly. They were not what the world outside had become. They were the second output Holland had feared. Sana saw it first. Sana had always seen things first. She made a sound, small and level, that was not a scream, but the specific sound a person makes when they have understood for certain that the door behind them is the only door that matters. "Shaft," Del said. We moved. I will not tell you how we moved. I will tell you only that we moved in the order we had established, and that the order broke, and that when the order broke, Dell was the one who broke it, because Dell was the one who had decided, I think at the door of his wife's room, that he was not going to leave the building. He shut the door to the maintenance ring behind Sana. He shut it from the wrong side. Dell, Mara said against the metal. Go, he said. The shaft is 200 yards. You have 8 minutes. Go. Dell. Mara, I have the codes. I am going to the blast doors. I am going to let Rook in. I am going to hold the doors until he and his people are inside. And then, I'm going to close the doors behind them. Dell. Rook signed it. I signed it. Let the people who signed it be the people who stay. I heard Mara's hand on the door. I heard her not open it. I heard, at her shoulder, Sana make the same small level sound she had made in the locker area. And I heard her not move either. I understood that they had both decided, faster than I had, that Dell had earned this, and that the cruelty of our grief was not owed a veto over his choice. Go, Dell said. We went. We reached the shaft in 7 minutes. Sana went up first, and Mara went up second, and I went up last. And at the top of the shaft, in the cold, thin morning air of the dry creek bed, we lay on our bellies in the bramble, and we did not speak. We heard the blast doors open. We heard Rook's convoy enter. We heard, perhaps 4 minutes later, the blast doors close. We did not hear what happened inside. We did not stay to hear. We walked west. We did not stop until sundown. We did not speak until the fire we finally permitted ourselves at full dark, in the hollow of a ridge 12 miles from the facility, was burning low and steady. Mara made tea from rainwater. Sana held the cup in both hands. I sat across from them, and I watched the fire. And I thought about a green binder and a manila folder and a photograph of a woman with short brown hair and a laugh caught mid-motion. Do you think the doors will hold? Sana asked, eventually. Yes, I said. The doors will hold. Forever? I did not answer. Mara looked at me across the fire. We have to decide, she said, whether to tell anyone we meet what is in there. No, I said. We do not. Why not? Because if we tell them, they will want to open it. The fire gave its small, steady sound. No one spoke for a long time. We do not use the word factory anymore. We do not name the place. When Sana and Mara and I speak of that week, we speak of it in indirect grammar. The way one speaks of a grief that has not yet finished shaping the person it is shaping. I have not slept an unbroken night since. I do not expect to. In the hours I do not sleep, I think about Dell at the blast doors. And I think about the green binder we did not burn. And I think about the 9 signatures at the bottom of a sealing order that was meant to be final and was not. I am not the person who walked into those tunnels. That person believed the worst thing in the world was the thing that was coming for him. I have learned that the worst thing is not coming. The worst thing is the one you decide to seal. And the question of whether, when it calls your name in a voice you used to love, you will be the one who opens the door. I have not opened it. I am not yet sure I will not. Thank you for listening to the story till the end. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for the next story.